Even with all the love the Star Wars prequels get these days, which will never fail to mystify me, I like to think, in my hubris, fans of these movies might look at my previous two videos and say, you know what, that wasn't half bad. I don't think anybody will say that about this video. Seeing Anakin's transformation from Anakin to Vader? Yeah, we're not gonna do that. This decision might baffle you, especially if you're a fan of the prequels, but I have a good reason for it. It all comes down to moral complexity. I love bad guys who are not completely bad, and good guys who are not completely good. It makes for a more interesting story. But original flavor Star Wars is a modern fairy tale. You don't normally have moral complexity in fairy tales. The stepmother doesn't let her go to the dance because she's evil. The witch wants to eat the kids because she's evil. The witch decides she's going to prick her finger and die because she's evil. Take away the spaceship, Star Wars is a fairy tale. A wise wizard, a kid picking up the sword of his father to go on an adventure, a princess in need of rescue, all fairy tale elements. Your characters aren't three-dimensional. Moff Tarkin doesn't have especially deep motivations explaining why he's okay with blowing up planets. He does it because he's evil. If we're showing this guy's journey, and we're told he used to be a swell guy, we can't do the black and white morality of the original movies. We have to explain why he went from this to this. He can't wake up one day and decide to be evil. If it's a choice he makes, he has to think there's a good reason to make that choice. I don't think these movies did a good job showing the moral complexity. If Anakin's fall to the dark side was done to save his wife, I never understood why he stayed with the Emperor another 20 years after she died. And if he has issues with the Jedi, we should see him question the methods of the Jedi a lot more instead of him questioning Obi-Wan a couple of times in Episode 2. Even if the prequels did a great job of handling a hero's fall, it would not have worked for me. I'm the nerd who would want to watch the movies numerically. You can't do that when Episodes 1 through 3 hypothetically show a complex war drama where the bad guys are doing what they think is right, and the good guys sometimes have to get their hands dirty doing what they think is right. Then you jump into Episode 4, and the same bad guys from the prequel trilogy are blowing up planets with a smile on their face. That's not to say fairy tales can't be more advanced than good guys and bad guys. Look at Game of Thrones. Knights, dragons, princesses in danger, but most of the characters, you can see why they are doing what they're doing. But Star Wars didn't start off as a complex drama. If you're going back in time and working toward that simplified narrative, you almost have to work within those same boundaries, which can be difficult if you're telling the prequel trilogy through Anakin's eyes, which is why I elected not to show these movies through Anakin's eyes. I'm not even the 50th person to suggest Obi-Wan should have been the central character of these movies, with Anakin having a role comparable to Han Solo. I wouldn't show Anakin's fall to the dark side in order to preserve the I am your father reveal in Empire. If you watch 1 through 6, you're telling your audience something, then going back and acting like it's a surprise. But if Anakin is more of a side character, you wouldn't need to see every twist and turn on his path to becoming Vader. You could see hints of his selfishness and greed, but not all the steps he takes toward reaching for power. The prequels operate with the understanding the audience is already familiar with the original trilogy. Christopher Lee holding the plans to the Death Star is played as a reveal because we already know what that is and how important it will be later. Even a funny line like Obi-Wan saying Anakin will be the death of him, these movies are filled with references to the movies that take place later. And if your preferred watching order is 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, you may not have a problem with the prequel showing us stuff that was a big twist in the original trilogy. Normally, I watch in production order, but I think it would be neat to make these movies as if they were made before the original trilogy, with a big plan of what was coming. Give your audience the chance to watch them in that way and be impressed with the stuff that impressed audiences in the 1980s. What would I do for the conclusion of this trilogy? In between Episode 2 and 3, everything hits the fan. Obi-Wan is on the run from the newly formed Empire. Along with what's left of the Jedi Order, he's been branded a traitor by the Emperor. Helping the Empire hunt down their enemies is Darth Vader, who we find out through dialogue Obi-Wan has already had a run-in with. The Jedi already being in decline for centuries makes Anakin's betrayal a little easier to swallow. I always hated Order 66 since the clones kill most of the Jedi, but Obi-Wan says Vader helped the Empire hunt down and murder the Jedi Knights. For all we know, Lucas originally intended for there to be 12 Jedi Knights and not thousands, but this makes it seem like Vader was more involved in the death of the Jedi Order than killing defenseless kids while the clones did all the real work. If done right, the audience will think Xizor was corrupted and turned to the dark side, killing Anakin, which is why neither of them are with Obi-Wan. We get a glimpse of Obi-Wan's from a certain point of view mentality. He wants to preserve the memories of Anakin and tell people who knew Anakin he died a hero, fighting this new Sith Lord who came out of nowhere. Obi-Wan doesn't like the lies, while he's very okay with it by the time we get to A New Hope. On the run with Obi-Wan is Padme and her 2 kids, about a year old. In my version of Attack of the Clones, we saw the very beginning of the rebellion, but the Emperor was able to target many of the leaders who could have posed a threat against him. There are many across the galaxy who don't like what the Republic has turned into, and Padme is trying to unite all unsatisfied parties into one unified banner against the Empire. Obi-Wan is basically basically Padme's bodyguard, though she isn't sure his heart is in it. We began the trilogy with Obi-Wan spiritually defeated and the galaxy not getting better because of his efforts. Then his faith in the Force is renewed after seeing a vision of a Jedi Knight saving the galaxy, who he believed was Anakin after falling in love with Padme. Then Obi-Wan lost faith in his government, seeing the corruption he either couldn't or wouldn't see before. Now he's a shell of who he once was. He's completely given up. Almost. Remember when Darth Maul showed our Jedi a Force vision in my version of Episode 2? In that vision, we saw ancient Jedi temples and powerful Force artifacts, which Vader is now hunting down. Obi-Wan is determined to stop Vader from becoming even more powerful, and he thinks he's not going to survive this encounter, but he's okay with that. With all the awful stuff that he's been unable to stop, if he can do one last good thing for the universe, he will be content. Padme is heading in the direction of an ancient Jedi temple Obi-Wan knows holds the relic Vader is looking for. This comes from Obi-Wan's more spiritual training that Vader never had, so when Obi-Wan saw Maul's vision, he knew where the stuff was, while Vader has to search. Ooh, if you want a it's like poetry, it rhymes, this could be the same temple Luke was hiding in a sequel trilogy. Bale Organa, kind of like Obi-Wan, is filled with desperation and failure. He has become a coward since the rise of the Empire. He was trying to make the galaxy a better place, and now he's seen the opposition in the Senate mysteriously silenced, and he's afraid not just for his safety, but for his own planet. He knows the Empire is rotten to its core, but he's given up on doing anything about it. He thinks if he can be a good leader for his people, that might send positive repercussions throughout the galaxy. But the Fates have other ideas. Remember those mad Jedi clones in my version of Episode 2? One of them comes to Alderaan seeking sanctuary. Even though he was on the other side of the war not long ago, we've got an enemy of my enemy situation. Palpatine would want possibly insane Jedi clones dealt with. Bale doesn't want this trouble on his doorstep, but the clone points out Bale used to campaign for clone rights in between the Clone Wars. Bale could tell him to get lost, but he wouldn't feel right if he betrayed his principles. While he wouldn't be a main character, I like the idea of a clone predisposed to psychotic violence trying to go against his nature and retire in peace. Goes hand in hand with Obi-Wan living a life of solitude in the aftermath of the wars. When Padme finds out what Obi-Wan's planning, she is furious. Even in the darkest times, she always admired his ability to persevere, until now. Even with the Empire branding their best hope outlaws, Padme hasn't given up. They can still take back their planets, but only if the people who can do something actually act. Obi-Wan is deaf to her speech, and they part ways. Padme's caravan is attacked by Imperial fighters. This squad is led by a grunt who fought with Padme and Obi-Wan in the war. He knows who he's attacking in the caravan, and he justifies what he's doing by saying his loyalty never changed. He fought for the government then, and he is now. He claims Padme and her friends are the ones who betrayed what they fought for. Just when you think Padme is done for, the rest of the Imperial fighters get a message and they pull back, leaving the guy talking with Padme undefended. His ship is shot from another Imperial fighter who immediately leaves. It's Vader. He told the other Imperials they cannot track down the leaders of the rebellion if they kill their only leads, and their leader forgot his place by getting too big for his britches. Or, if you know who this guy is after going through the whole saga, you can say this is a hint of old Anakin saving his wife from enemy fire. At the Jedi Temple Padme dropped Obi-Wan at, he finds the artifact and destroys it. In The Mandalorian Season 2, there's this rock a Jedi can sit on, and it acts as a beacon to other Force sensitives. There's something like that here, and it adds salt in the wound for Vader, because it's calling using the light side of the Force. It's like Obi-Wan is saying, I'm over here, remember when you used to not suck? Meanwhile, Bale gets a visit from Moff Tarkin. Tarkin suspects Bale is harboring fugitives because of his old pro-clone sympathies, but he doesn't have proof. Tarkin's here to remind Bale, you may be king of your planet, but you're a small fish in the rest of the Empire, and the big fish wants to know that you'll stay in line. Bale says he will, but the implied threats move Bale out of his apathy. Even if he does everything the Emperor wants him to do, there's no guarantee his people will be safe. Bale's arc comes to him agreeing with what Padme was saying, that to sleep at night, he has to act against tyranny. At the temple, Vader lands, and I'd want to show how different he acts here than he will in A New Hope. A New Hope, your first impression of Vader is how nonplussed he is by all the bodies he's crossing as he goes to choke a dude. Fighting the rebellion is old hat to him, and him casually throwing a dude he just lifted by the throat, you get the feeling that guy's just a mild annoyance. But here, Vader is raw from his previous fight with Obi-Wan, and he's not calm about what he's doing. He's very reckless, which under ordinary circumstances would give Obi-Wan the clear advantage, if A, Obi-Wan wasn't ready to die, and B, they weren't fighting on Jedi holy ground. Vader's flare-ups are interfacing with the temple, which is having a negative impact on the landscape around them. Padme naively thinks she escaped the Imperial fighters Vader had chased off earlier and makes it to her rebel contact, but the fighters Vader didn't shoot down arrive, ready to crush the rebellion before it's out of the cradle. At the temple, Obi-Wan and Vader are both temporarily stunned by a Force vision, the same one Obi-Wan had before he took Anakin on as an apprentice. Obi-Wan realizes the Force didn't want Anakin Anakin as the savior of the universe, but his son. I promise this was not on purpose, but we have another King Arthur reference. In the 1998 Merlin miniseries, the Lady of the Lake sent Merlin to find a guardian to protect Guinevere while Arthur looks for the Holy Grail. Merlin thinks it's Lancelot, but it's his son Galahad. I wasn't thinking of this whenever I set this up in my Phantom Menace video. Obi-Wan realizes the Force still has a purpose for him, so he can't die here. Obi-Wan forces a rock slide that separates him and Vader, maybe knocks Vader off a cliff, and Obi-Wan retreats. At the Rebel meeting, all seems lost, but the cavalry's arrived in the form of Bale Organa and Alderaan's private armada. It's a cheat, but the Jedi clone used the Force and told Organa Padme was in trouble. The Imperial fighters are defeated, and Padme asks, "Why did you help? What about the danger to your people?" Bale says they're in danger either way. "You were right, we have to stick together if we're to take back the galaxy." Obi-Wan rendezvous back with Padme and Bale, and Padme has grim news. The Imperial fighters who followed her here, although they were destroyed, they knew who they were following. It won't take long for the Empire to figure out she was one of the rebel leaders. She says she had to die in the battle so the Empire won't come after her, and more importantly, her children. Furthermore, she suggests the children be split up. If the Empire does find out a rebel leader is still alive, she doesn't want both of her children to die. She will hide in Bale Organa's court as a handmaiden, with Leia being raised in the public as his daughter, though in private Leia knows who her real mom is. Obi-Wan volunteers to take the boy, and Padme insists the less she knows about where he's taken, the better, for his own safety. This lines up with what Leia said in Return of the Jedi, where she knew who her real mom was, but she died when Leia was very young. Even if Leia has the Force, I don't buy her remembering her mom who died when she was 3 seconds old. Also, this gives Padme more agency instead of her standing around dying of sadness. This is also a better explanation for splitting up the kids than the Skywalkers are strong with the Force and we're going to use them against the Empire when they're older, which Lucas had already said the Force was a spiritual thing. You have to train to be good with the Force. I'm not sure why these babies would be strong with the Force. The movie ends with Obi-Wan meeting Owen on Naboo. In my headcanon, Obi-Wan told Owen what happened to Anakin, but Owen did not tell Beru because it would break her heart. And remember, in my version, Beru is Anakin's younger sister. This explains how nonchalant Beru is about Luke being too much like his father. If you ask why they moved to Tatooine, Obi-Wan impressed on them the Empire might want to make examples of the family of a Republic hero, at least that's the story they told Beru. It would have made more sense for Owen and Beru to change Luke's last name and for Obi-Wan to change his, but at the time of making A New Hope, Lucas didn't know Luke was related to Vader, so making that movie work with what was revealed later, and making this trilogy work with all of that is difficult, so some characters have to act in ways that don't entirely make sense. I'm sure you guys won't like this. These movies have developed a cult following, but I am not part of that cult. My approach was different here than it was in the previous times I've talked about things I would have changed, and I acknowledge you guys wouldn't be into this approach, but I thought it would be fun to go in this direction of making the saga feel like it was planned out from the beginning, and watching it as if it was all made in numerical order. I'm sure you won't like how disconnected I made everything. Palpatine's not behind the Clone Wars, isn't connected to Maul, each movie is a standalone thing with Obi-Wan's character evolving and changing over the trilogy. I'm more interested in character than plot, so I wanted to emphasize that. But also, the original trilogy isn't one big story. The plot of A New Hope is all wrapped up at the end, and while the bad guys carry over from Empire to Jedi, those movies felt unique and different from each other. I wanted to go for something kind of like that here. This will probably be the last time I talk about the prequels, especially in this capacity of fixed videos. Even if you do like the prequels, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, I do this kind of thing all the time, so be sure to check me out when I'm not talking about Star Wars. Until then, may the Force be with you.